Well, thank you, Roger, and thank you, Ruth and Lord Baker, for giving me the opportunity to speak this morning. Actually, just having moved into the academic sphere, I try and avoid what I conclude academics most often do, which is write things that only other academics are interested in. Reference every sentence just to be getting on the ref framework, and in general, not following Churchill's dictum, which is, if I had more time, I would have written less. So, in terms of what I'm going to do this morning, is Ruth has asked me to look at the changing landscape of further education in 20 minutes. Well, if you can do that, you're a better man than me. But I'll try and do my best, and kind of the thought that I would cover everything that's happening in your world, it would be kind of insulting to try and do that in 20 minutes. So I'll give myself a framework to work to in terms of an analytical device, but I'll try and touch on things, particularly, of course, for this audience on 16 to 18 and 14 to 19, rather than all the aspects of adult skills and indeed higher technical skills at level 4, 5 and 6, which are areas that actually particularly concern me presently, but as I say, I'll only touch on those. What I want to talk about, first of all, is the analytical device, is big P policy and small p policy, which I think, Roger, is a term that was in much use in the Blair Strategy Unit, but has fallen into disuse. But I think it's a really useful concept to use to look at what's going on at the moment. I'll look at apprenticeships and T-levels. For that, that's shorthand for all of the curriculum reform and revisions drawing from and applying to the skills plan. And I'll say a few words about area reviews and exec, just to show I've actually been in a university. I learned that's the only Latin I actually know. That's area reviews, I think, looking to my classical scholars around here, and everything that follows thereon. Big P policy and small p policy, the idea is a fairly sort of self-evident one, but I think a really important one. It's about operationalizing a strategy. You can have a grand design or grand intention, but you need to make progress towards any grand intention by a series of small steps that should interlock, reinforce, and move you towards your overall goal. Accepting, of course, the precise way your plan works out never works out as you would intend it to have done. So, you know, the longer term a plan is, the broader the intention, the less you can predict in detail what will happen in a year. But you need to continue to move in that general direction. And it's those small steps towards the goal. And in terms of policy making, you can state, I want to have an English dual system, or I want to have a revised technical education system, and it needs to have these broad characteristics. But then it's down to policymakers to make the individual policy decisions and enact policy, enable policy, in order to continue to move it towards. My submission overall to you today is that I think you need to at this stage of a substantial reorganisation of our technical and professional education system, is be aware of both the short term, the little small p policy, but keep particularly a view to the long-term position. Because at the start of this journey, there's going to be a lot of missteps, semi-steps, which are going to be big in your headlights, but in the longer term won't turn out to have been as significant as you thought at the time. So keeping a focus on the long term and what's seeking to be achieved here, I think will be important to guide you in your strategies. And as a by remark now, I think career colleges are well placed in relation to that big P policy shift. Now, all these things up here, and if I'm talking about apprenticeships and T-levels, I put all these down as small p policy, actually. And small p policy has a habit of writing itself over time. So you've had the register of approved training providers, and if you're in your college, you've heard your principal going mad, and you've heard ALP going mad about the register and the misstep as it started out. So what have we seen in the last week? An adjustment. The register has been maintained, but it was only ever an enabler to enabling apprenticeship growth and growing the market marginally. Now, you may say it was done in a cack-handed and useless way. Well, the policy machine recognises those sorts of things, adjusts, and comes up with it. It wasn't fundamental. Similarly, the whole hachinée around non-levy procurement. I don't think was of long-term significance. The machine will grind this out to come up with a sensible way of doing it. More significant there is if you get into the big P policy is the levy, which I'll come back to, which I do think is a big P policy shift and something that actually requires deeper consideration. Similarly, there's the Register of Assessment Organisations. The fact that it's not filled is troubling, difficult, and significant, but it's not big P policy. The big P policy is moving to more an endpoint assessment within apprenticeships, and the significance of that development is the one to keep in view. Similarly, the single awarding bodies under T-levels is only small P policy. It's intended to enable the policy. It is not the policy. So you can see, I think, probably when that begins to be introduced, there'll be some adjustment around how it's done, some accommodations. And I'd even say the 15 routes is somewhere between big P policy and small P policy. It's not big P policy itself, not what's in each of those routes. The fact that we've moved to 15 routes and actually beginning to classify and give simpler routes at 16 to 80 in bigger groups is significant and amounts to big P policy. What's in each one of those will be adjusted as we go forward, as people reach forward to it. But thinking about your curriculum in bigger chunks, which more likely reflect what the employment market provides, is more sensible to do, so in terms of the longer term direction of travel. What is big P policy, though, is that diagram within the Sainsbury report, within the skills plan, and the consequences and thinking through the fact we will have a bifurcated system, what I've called an English dual system, a system which is not the same as the German dual system. It can't be. The German economy is different, the German business model is different, and learnings from other systems are always plagued with difficulty when you try and pluck it out of context. So if we build a dual system in England, it must be related to our business model, our economic circumstances, and cultural situation here. But the fact we're talking now about having a more significant divide at 16 into an academic route, or a route which is aimed at academic progression or further study, and one which is more focused on moving it into the workplace, comprising of two routes within it, the apprenticeship route and the college-based route, I think is potentially significant. Of course, a diagram like this has its limitations, and the greatest limitation that it's totalizing. It kind of applies, seems to apply to everybody, and you'll all know that the biggest kind of inconvenient truth around this is general applied qualifications, which are a really significant part of what colleges provide. And where do they fall? Well, you know, you pay your money, takes choice how it goes. I actually see most, the BTEC type army, moving one or two ways. They either move into what will effectively become applied A-levels, enabling progression in an academic route but to a particular range of academic courses and institutions, or they move into the T-level route in terms of having a different focus. The original focus, you might say, what BTECs were responding to the needs of employers foremost, rather than academic progression. But understanding what the implications of that diagram are, I think is reasonably important for you, and I'll take you through some of the considerations here. So T-levels, the new T-levels, is it something for the many or is it something for the few? I think if you cast this T-levels as being for anybody who doesn't do A-levels, you fall into the same curse of many vocational educational reforms rather than technical education reforms, and that it's for people that can't do academic, do T-levels. If you present it in that manner, it can never be of the same status, regard, and importance within our system as the academic route. So for my money, particularly at the outset, T-levels are going to be for the few. They're going to be for between 20 and 30% of the cohort only. And if they're going to be built in a way which is rigorous and demanding, that will always to be the case. Defining what rigor and standards are in T-levels is important, because they must not become, from my perspective, merely A-levels in a STEM subject. There must be a distinctive mode of teaching, a distinctive form of content, and a distinctive form of assessment to make them relevant and proper. And so you see it in those kind of terms. if you moved on, I'm happy later the day with people around talk more about T-levels. This term or employer ownership, I think, is important here, and there is a significant shift amongst colleges. And I'll come back to some of the consequences of T-levels in a moment under the term specialisation. But I think employer ownership is an uncomfortable term, but we have had with the levy a significant change here. It's perhaps a more significant change than I'd seen in the 8 years. Everyone had been talking about employer ownership and leadership through Leach and then a range of other, and the Train to Gain. But this is different. The money is with the employer, and you are providing a service to the employer. You have to win the business from the employer, not take a budget to the employer and say, help me spend my budget. If you think that through in terms of your college approach, it must be a very significant approach in the way in which you take yourself to employers if you're going to be in the apprenticeship business. And incidentally, I don't know that all colleges need to be in the main contract apprenticeship business. They might be looking for their best role in conjunction with another in delivering apprenticeships. But it does seem to me that it demands a different whole college approach to marketing yourself to employers. Incidentally, in relation to T-levels, the term employer ownership, I think, is inappropriate towards T-levels. I think I'd actually prefer the term employer informed in relation to T-levels as an educational development rather than a more training development. But what those two things do begin to bring to me, I think, is about specialisation, and this is something the sector needs to stand up to. If T-levels are for the few, not for the many, and they're to be demanding, I really can't see even but the largest colleges doing more than 6 or 7 T-levels. If the requirement is to have industry standard facilities, staff who have been drawn from the industries in which you're teaching, links with employers which are extensive, and a route through to level 4 and 5, you're beginning to set a criteria that will be quite difficult for a college to cover all 15 routes. Moreover, I have to say, it begins, as the term puts it in the Sainsbury report and the skills plan, it makes it college-based, a core college product, not a school's product. I really do see it being extremely difficult for a school to deliver a T-level, as it is extremely difficult for a school to deliver apprenticeships. So specialisation begins to bubble up, something that the sector has shied away from for a long time. I think it also begins to say about qualifications, which I'll come back to in a moment. English and maths is not going away, as you know. There may be some variation. If I'm talking about my big P prescription here, you are in the English and maths business for the foreseeable future. How particularly the qualifications will reform in that area, you are going to be in that business. Whether or not you want to be in it, you will be in that business, and therefore configuring yourselves in order to deliver, I think, is extremely important. Coming finally to funding, like Roger, I'm probably more comfortable with funding presently now than I have been for a long time. Doesn't mean to say I'm really sanguine about it, but I think we've hit the bottom, or even Alison Wolf's view, we're close to the precipice, and people have realised that we're close to the precipice. I mean, to say I think that we're not the head of anyone's list for funding cuts in the near future. The greatest danger actually is in terms of the competition for funds with schools in the face of lobbying across government in terms of school funding and how we might fall from that. And actually, interestingly, a reflection which then goes to my next slide here, which is more about the challenges rather than colleges for policymakers in relation to apprenticeships and T-levels. And the first one is pace here. One of the big concerns, I think Roger talked about this, we have got a reform programme. Things are going to happen, Roger. You can't ask for nothing to happen, but I think we need to happen on the current programme and take a reasonable period in order to deliver it. And if we're going to have a once-in-a-generation change, we need to give us 5 to 10 years to do this. The funding actually is a problem on this. I think officials will be very concerned to get the £500 million that's been been dedicated to T-levels out and through the door as quickly as possible, because they don't want to lose it to the school vote. That then will hurry up the pace here more than would be sensible to do. And they will be needing to show small p policy advances quickly through that 500 million, which I think is going to be entirely unhelpful, because this should be done carefully, well, and with colleges co-creating and advising on how the small P policy that delivers the big P policy outcome is realised. So pace, nonetheless, I think is a really important element here. But against my concern about the money is the degree of political consensus now applying across technical and professional education, and that there is no fight in this area. The clue, or the evidence for that is actually just about the only bill on education within the Queen's speech was around about technical and professional education. With the government concludes no one's going to oppose what's within it because there's a consensus around the general direction of travel. I do also think, this is an academic point more particularly, we need to be much more disciplined about how we differentiate what technical education is from academic education. There has been insufficient work on saying on how it differs. If we don't do that, we'll revert back, as we always seem to an academic model of assessment and teaching, which is inappropriate to the type of education that we're preparing. I think also we need to think about the original intention is to move easily between the apprenticeship route and the college-based route, the T-levels. I cannot see how that can be achieved without qualifications being the currency and allowing people to move between the one and the other, to carry evidence of their credentials as they move between a college-based route and an apprenticeship route. So I do actually see the qualifications coming back into the system. I also see potentially the T-levels, the 15 routes, again, don't worry about so much what the routes are, but there are 15, as being an organising concept for trailblazer standards, to put them into families and groups, which makes a lot more sense than is currently the case, where you have a burgeoning number of individual apprenticeship standards. So they could be an organising concept for apprenticeships. I think work placements is going to be a considerable challenge both to officials and to yourselves to achieve them, but if you're only doing it for the few, so this is high quality 15-week work placement, and you're only working against 5 or 6 T-level routes in the college, you can see how it's more achievable to find the 15-week work placements than if you're trying to find it for nearly every student in the college. I also see this as potentially one of the first areas where the levy funding is liberalised to go to employers for other than apprenticeships. The transition year requires a good deal of consideration. It's going to be an extraordinarily important catch-all to enable people to be recovered, and its relationship to traineeships, for instance, I think is important to tease out. And I think you'll see some research coming out in the next few weeks on traineeships and the transition year. If that comes out with a consultation request, and I really would encourage you to respond and provide your thoughts in that regard. And I won't talk, because time doesn't really permit me to talk about higher technical skills, but I think having that route forward to level 4 and 5, industries facing technical qualifications, I think is extraordinarily important to enable the lower level qualifications as well. Turning to area reviews, the proposition was fewer, larger, more resilient colleges. I think we might have fewer, larger colleges. Whether or not I'll have fewer, larger, more resilient colleges is an open question. What I do think is the greatest lacunae or missing point within the area reviews was actually the focus on the curriculum across an area. If the result was only fewer, larger colleges behaving in exactly the same manner as they did before, we'll end up in the same place eventually, with overlapping provision, competing provision, with huge gaps across areas where there is no delivery made. So reverting to that predominantly level 2, predominantly generalist, easier to deliver, but actually each larger college still just competing each other to death. So how we get to a position where we can be more both collaborative and competitive seems to be me a real challenge amongst the sector overall. I do think this inherently talks about more specialisation between groups of colleges, particularly in urban settings, and how they coordinate their provision in order to get a better service overall to a local area, but that's going to require a good deal of discipline and consideration about how that is enabled by policymakers, but also how colleges respond in that regard. But it does seem to me that career colleges particularly are well placed in this regard, but clear branded offers within the colleges, focusing on links with employers in the local area, which gives a distinctive feel to what they're providing. And that obviously also is wrapped up in the whole notion of devolution and how we'll manage with that. But I think there'll be more wish, particularly from the combined authorities, for a greater distinction between what colleges provide in a local area. I was leaving out, I don't know if there were intended to be any questions, Ruth. I was going to say just a couple of things, I think, if I may, about technology quickly. They are really very quick things. I did do a report, first report I did at IOE into technology and the FE sector's preparedness to do this, and the won't surprise you, the greatest conclusion was that before you actually attend to the curriculum, you need to attend to your staff's requirements and actually understanding technology, how it might be used, and not even become digital natives, just being digital visitors would be a good starting point, I think, for your staff. I think career colleges, I am very pleased and be grateful to be invited to be a specialist advisor. I believe in the model, and I have to choose my words very carefully here. Lord Baker and I have some spirited exchanges from time to time. Why I particularly like career colleges is because they're not inserted into an ecology as an extraneous factor, but they are built from within institutions that have an allegiance to the place and have been in that place for a good period of time, but with a surrounding discipline. I also think it's true to say, I have to say, Lord Baker, with a firm thought of conservative methodology, they've been set up without government funding, and through that means have demonstrated the need by their continued existence. And the concept has been tested in a way which has not been subverted by having government funding being available. So that rigour is almost what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, could be applying to career colleges, I think. And just a reproach to my chair. This word vocational is an honourable word, a proper word, but it's a damaged word. And the only bit of real research I've done in this job that I would hold up to any real external scrutiny is whenever I go to see a college and I go on the train, I jump in a taxi off the train station and say, take me to the tech. I always get to the right college.
I'm glad to hear we're starting some spirited debate. So thank you very much, Martin. Very grateful. We have one more keynote speaker before we break for networking and coffee. And I am really delighted to introduce to you John Evans. John Evans is Principal and CEO of Yeovil College. And if you haven't visited, I urge you to do so. Not because I know John has all the time in the world, but just because it's such an inspirational place. There are many of those run by most of you in the room today. I say that because we have employers and others in the room. But what I have witnessed in Yeovil has been an inspiration to me. Yeovil College is a tertiary college, and it's set to serve young people in quite a large geographical expanse with quite significant rural challenges and transport challenges. And I'm not going to say too much more because I want John to share with you his journey and his experience. So over to John. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. This is not healthy, this exercise. I got a watch for my birthday, which my wife's got me, and it measures your heart rate. And it was 48 when I walked in, it's now 110. Career colleges, great things. Right, okay, I guess you've heard sort of a lot of strategy, a lot of politics, a lot of high-level stuff. I guess I'm quite a simple principal in his way, and I deal with lots of operational stuff. I'm luckily enough to also be an Ofsted inspector, so I get to see a lot of colleges as well. I have to say, I feel really honoured to be here, and a bit humble, really. Lots of brilliant people, lots of great colleges, but I also like talking about my own college. So in one way I feel humble, but I also feel grateful, and thank you so much for giving me giving me the opportunity. Just a couple of things, you make your notes, you know, when you have speakers that come on before. And I just a couple of things. First, having listened to Lord Baker, Roger and Martin, for me as a sort of an everyday acting principle, it was a bit of a therapy session for me in terms of, yeah, you can just, we deal with it day in, day out, but it's nice to hear those overarching comments. And I agree with what Roger said about so many changes. I've been in the sector long enough to, I guess there's a few in here that may have been, but it comes back round again, doesn't it? You know, we talk about end test assessments for apprenticeships. I guess I'm one of the few principals that started as an apprentice. I had an end test. I was sent up to Shrewsbury from Somerset. You can tell it's a good Somerset accent. And I had to go overnight and stay there and do an end test. And that made me decide, that allowed me to be qualified as what I was then as an automotive technician, a mechanic, as my wife keeps reminding me. So it's interesting how things go around. I think T-levels, I wasn't going to comment T-levels, but only because one of the things I need to talk about in a minute is we've been chosen to do the work placements, and I'll talk about that. So clearly I've got one eye on T-levels for many reasons. I guess having seen so many things come and go, CPVEs, GMVQs, 14 to 19 diplomas, etc., let's just not make this another fad, because we flex and we change. And I guess what we are really good at in the further education sector is changing and meeting the demands of everything that's actually thrown at us. I also worry about the timescale. You know, we keep saying, well, it's fully rolled out by 2022, starts in 2019. That's not that long away. When you're talking about all that needs to be designed, and we've just gone through doing the new standards for apprenticeships, boy, they were ready to roll out, weren't they? You know, we're running around at the moment. Last month, we could only sign up one learner because that was the only standard that was available to be signed up to be allowed to go through the ILR, because every time we put it in, it bounced back. And you think, we've got to be better at it than this as a sector. I guess I've got one question before I go on to my talk, and that is, skills development, is it truly important to our financial recovery and future? And if you look at the industrial strategy, the post-16 skills plan, you just have a look, see how many times the word skills is in both of those. So clearly, it's a massive part of what we need to do to enable the financial recovery of the country. Now, if that's the case, you know where I'm going with this, one day we'll get supported, because that skill development is done better in FE than in any other part of the sector. And we do need that support. Okay, I'm going to finish one bit before I go on the presentation, and that is, and it's a big thank you to Ruth. I think I'm going to clone a new term, and I think it should be, have you been Ruthed? Because for all of us, we've jumped into this with no funding, with only the promise of support for some brilliant people, tons of extra work. And we've all gone, yes, please, we'll have it, because Ruth's come to visit. And I remember when we first met, so as you'll hear in a minute, our college and Yeovil District Hospital, literally either side of a roundabout. And Paul Mears is a bit like me. We like challenges. We like going at things. We spent the first meeting with Ruth. After 10 minutes, me and Paul were exhausted. Absolutely exhausted. So I'm going to coin the term Ruthed. Okay. I was given half an hour to talk about building skills for the business in a changing FE world in half an hour. That's easy, isn't it? Let's just do it. Okay. I just want to start this clip, and it's a clip I've used many times. I'm in the colleges I've been in, I'm passionate about teaching and learning. I'm passionate about moving colleges to outstanding, and it's always driven by how good the teaching and learning is. And it's got better and better and better. And I've been into many of your colleges that are in here today to do sort of some conference stuff. And it's just a clip, and I'll just play it, and you'll see where it goes.
I'm worried about little Dilbert. He's not like other kids.
What do you mean?
Yesterday, I left him alone for a minute, and he disassembled the TV, our clock, and the stereo.
That's perfectly normal. Kids take things apart.
Oh. The part that worries me is he used the components to build a ham radio set.
Oh, dear.
Is that bad?
Normally, I'd want to run an EEG on him, but the machine isn't working. It's worse than I feared.
What is it?
I'm afraid your son has the knack.
The knack?
The knack. It's a rare condition characterized by an extreme intuition about all things mechanical and electrical, and utter social ineptitude.
Can he lead a normal life?
No. He'll be an engineer. There.
Now, I can get away with that because I'm an engineer. But it's quite a good message, and it's something that just getting our minds around how we deliver, how that teaching and learning and assessment, and in career colleges is critical because it's all the knack driven, it's all vocational skills driven, is really, really important. So for me, that total focus on teaching, learning and assessment is absolutely critical. You need to drive it, but it's different. And I'm picking up from what Martin said earlier, you know, if we get T levels right or whatever they end up being, it's not just another A level. We deliver in a different way. We learn in a different way. And clearly, and some of you know, when you look at the Ofsted framework now, and we go into colleges, put my Ofsted hat on now, but we're looking at skill development and progressive skill development, and it's really important because it's about meeting the needs of the local industry. Now, I think colleges have got better at it, a lot better at it. Clearly, we can always say, well, there's one that's not, but actually, true GFEs, tertiary colleges, are there to meet their local and regional need, full stop. And I'll lead into some of that. But one thing's for sure, what you can't do is just keep rolling over the same stuff. Because if you keep rolling over the same stuff, you'll get the same results. And what we're saying at the moment is that there's not enough of this skill or that skill, or there's not enough higher level skills, which is coming through quite strongly. And another one I use to staff, and it really hammers it home about doing things the same way and expecting a different result, is bloody madness. So this was a van that went off the harbour in Ireland, and they brought a truck in to pick it up. And they got somebody to calculate how big a truck they would need. So they calculated the centre of gravity at the bottom and the length of the arm, just so they could lift it up, and they used the weight of the van. Of course, what they forgot to do was to add the weight of the... So it's not real surprise when it doesn't go particularly well. Now then, bearing in mind this is doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result, because what they then did was to bring in another truck. But they used the same person to do the calculation. So they calculated the centre of gravity and the length of the arm. And again, they got the van out. And they used it for the heaviest vehicle, which was a lorry, but forgot to use the weight of the water. So it didn't particularly go well. So then they brought another truck in. You get the gist, don't you? But it's quite a powerful thing to say, look, in colleges, and I'm very critical of this, and all the colleges I've been in, we do things because we've always done it that way. We're very historical. We roll things over. And sometimes I just thrive on breaking the norm, and I love it when staff just stop and say, how can we do something different? And when Ruth came and we spoke about the career college, that's just what that was. It was something different. You could see it hit all the right buttons. So it's about how can we be sure that we are developing the skills, because if you haven't got those employer links, you're guessing. Literally, you're guessing. And I'm amazed when I go into colleges, when I observe as an inspector, well, I say, well, that skill's way out of date, but it's in the syllabus. That's not what it's about anymore. It's about making the skills ready for industry. So just three things I just want to talk to you about. And can I just say, I'm just picking up on my own college. I have no doubt that in colleges in this room, there are things that you do which are just, as good as and better than some of the things. But Ruth asked me to talk about it, so I'm going to talk about it. Don't ask me about acronyms, because we're a sector that just loves acronyms. Supple ones. So supple ones is where, for any full-time program, any vocational program, not A-levels, any vocational program, our course managers have to justify why they're running it. So we have to fill in a form. And the form either has to align it to either the local LEP priorities, and we straddle 2 LEPs, so there's 2 sets of priorities. Some of you will straddle more than 2 LEPs, or maybe just in 1 LEP, depending on where you are. You also then have to look at your LMI, your local market intelligence, and just to see, do you need 9,000? That's always the example we give in it. Do you need 9,000 hairdressers? It's about quantifying and those employability skills, and is it really meeting the need of that local industry? Clearly, I'm going to follow this up in a minute and show you some pictures. The other one is, and it's a brave one, and I've done it in my last 3 colleges, is we shouldn't be judging whether skill development is right. That's not our job. So we get employers to come in to observe the lessons, not to measure teaching and learning, because that's not right. We have processes for that. But I want to know if the skill development of what we're doing is it at the right level? Is it what you need in industry? And it's a simple form. The top box is comment on the skill level, and the second box is to comment on the resources. Are they fit for industry use? Powerful, powerful message. What that does, and when I first did it, I didn't quite realise the knock-on effect, but you really get an engagement. And invariably, somebody will go, oh, we haven't got any part-time teaching of you. So there's a sort of a backhanded way of getting people in through the door as well. So that's two examples. The third one, when study programs came on tap, we didn't play at them. We went for it. So I'm in now my 3rd year where everybody goes out and well, actually that's a lie. It was 97.4% of people went out and work experience. And that's including the A-levels, because it's a tertiary of A-levels as well. And we put a team together straight away, and they just, and we start with the employer, we measure the expectations, we set the targets for the young person, and that key question which Ofsted loves at the end is, has the young person been an impact to your company? And as soon as you can start evidence that with either sort of quantifiable evidence, then that's a powerful, powerful tool along judging the employability skills that have met on the way. Now, because of that, and because of what was in our inspection report, and because of Ruth had Sue Clark's arm behind her back, DFE came down to see us at Yeovil College and talked through, how did you manage to do this? How did you break the barriers with employers? Well, our employer engagement, I think, is very, very good. I know it's good in lots of places. So we've been chosen to do the work placement pilot from September. So that's 3 months' work experience for anybody who is doing a T-level route. And that's interesting in itself, because effectively they don't exist yet. You saw Martin's picture earlier, so we've sort of tried to align where we can. Interestingly, the stuff they've pulled out as well. So, you know, we set in a lot of art in there, sport was in there, travel and tourism, and it's just been crossed out. They're not in the T-levels. That's an interesting debate that we need to keep an eye on, because there's a whole cohort of learners under T-levels that I'm really concerned about, but that's a completely different conversation. Put a team together. One of the things you need to have is if you go into the work placement, so they've got to have a job description with the employer. So that's now going to be just over 200 job descriptions that we need to produce before September to get this up and running. Bearing in mind it's not long before it reaches you. This will be 2019. So hopefully in a year's time, if I'm invited back, I'll come back and let you know how the pilot's gone. We've got a very can-do attitude, and I talked to all the staff yesterday in the room, because I think it's a slightly skewed pilot, because they want it for the 2nd years of the current vocational programme. So use our language, year 2 of the BTECs. That's a hard sell when you didn't tell them at the beginning of year 1. So I've asked if we could run it in year 1, and the DFE have said, no, we want it in year 2, which we'll do it. But can you just sort of understand where I'm coming from? If you signed up for this programme at the beginning, it's easier to sell when at the beginning, halfway through when you're in your final year. And by the way, you've got to do 3 months' work experience. But talking to the staff the other day, we were very clear, we're going to make this work. If there's genuine barriers, then we will report back. You've got to remember, we are in a really rural area. So travel to work is travel to learn is about an hour and a half around us. So it's across country roads, and many of them don't have particularly good bus routes, if bus routes are there at all. So it would just be interesting to see how that pans out. But I feel quite strongly that we will give it a really, really, really good go. And I do believe in it. I think a really good work placement, and it's not rocket science, isn't it? Put your work placement bit in the heart of your apprenticeship team. Where's the progression going to go on to? If you get that link right, your apprenticeship growth, in theory, should naturally happen. I just want to go through a couple of things. Ofsted came. I set a target. I arrived in January 2014 that we'd be outstanding by September 2017, and of course Ofsted arrived October 2016. I can't control everything. But anyway, we had a great time, and we really, really pushed them. But some really great stuff that came out of it. Clearly about apprenticeships. I think the one about behaviour, and of course one of the things that's in the new the framework standards is a behavioural gateway. And if you haven't already got your tracking systems already catching that, you need to get on top of it, because it's not going away. So, and part of me then thinks, well, if you've got a behavioural gateway for standards, we should have a behavioural gateway for work placements. So I'm just mirroring the two things together. Why do you reinvent the wheel? It doesn't make any sense. So for the rest of us who are in colleges, you know what I'm going to say now. So for work placements, I've also embedded British values. We've also done equality and diversity. We've also done prevent. We've also done safeguarding. Bring it all in together. You know it's coming. Get on to it. I think the next key, who are really, really key for me, I think there's that bit about that development of skills was recognised. The bit about the work placements, I remember when the lead inspector came back into the base room, I was a nominee as well, which threw them, but when he came back into the base room, and he just said, my goodness, your work placement team are magic, aren't they? And I thought, well, I don't know what they did to him, but they clearly made a big impact. I don't think there's probably many that have got a strength on their front page of the report for English and maths. Again, when study programmes came on tap, we just tackled it absolutely head on. It's a challenge, and I could talk a whole conference on English and maths. The reality is we all believe in the development. We don't necessarily believe on it has to be a GCSE. But we are where we are, and there we make it work. And clearly the inspectors could see that. And then finally, the bit for me was about our partnerships. And literally in the last 6 months, we've won the Somerset Business Award and the Western Gazette Business Awards, which is Somerset and Dorset. And that's up against other fairly large businesses. So, just to give you some real headline stuff, conscious of the time. If you know your geography, what's Yeovil famous for? It used to be a sloping football pitch, or that's not there anymore. But it's famous because it makes helicopters. Although of late, some of the contracts have been moved to the States. So our link with Leonardo, as it is now, it used to be Augusta Westerns, is really, really strong. If you walk around our campus, you'll see many students with Leonardos across the top. Literally this year, they've donated us a whole helicopter. So if you go into our engineering workshops, we've got a 10 million helicopter sat in the middle of it. And what they did was their graduates put faults into it so that the people coming through now, not just for Leonardo, but for all the suppliers, have got access to that. And I guess for many of you, you will have pictures similar to this. I guess the only difference is that lots of the stuff you'll see in our engineering workshops, so for instance, an awful lot of composites because of the rotor blades of composite, etc., are very aero-driven. And again, that's that bit about making sure your local college meets the needs of your local learners, of your local employers. We've also got, you may have missed it on the news, a nuclear extension. I'm going to call it an extension. Although I work in Yeovil, I actually live in Bridgewater, so I've seen the growth of just sort of one bus going out with one man and their dog in the mornings to now because you're not allowed to drive out to Hinkley Point. The buses go now and they're cram full, and they're not even close to where they need to be at sort of employment level. You're talking thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. We don't even have enough in the southwest to be able to. So I've talked for quite a while now, probably for the last 2 or 3 years, about what I call the Yeovil vacuum, because Hinkley Point pay very well. They pay, because they have all these park and rides around, they pay the salary from the moment you sit on the bus. So you can imagine that's quite lucrative, I guess, that's probably the word I'm looking for, but attractive for certain people, especially if you've got skills, if you're a carpenter, a bricklayer, but it's much more than that. You know, it's security, it's business admin, it's hospitality, it's so much stuff. So we managed to get some money through the LEP, which was lucky. So we're building two workshops to try and work with that and try and grow the sort of skills. And that's one of the buildings we had open. Tommy Walsh from Ground Force came and worked for the students for the day. And then, of course, the main reason why I'm here today, our brilliant relationship with Yeovil District Hospital, who are here today. Debs, who's here, is actually on our Board of Governors. I struggle to often work out who's college staff and who's hospital staff. It just goes together. And our students are either over there or their staff are over here. And actually for September, we're now even chunking up the units, the apprenticeship programme we do together. And we also have, and some of you know about this, we also have a very successful Project Search programme. And if you ever want something really uplifting, just go on YouTube and type in Project Search Yeovil College and just see what an employer and college link partnership can do to people with learning difficulties or disabilities. Absolutely, mind-boggling. So these are some of our students over at Yeovil District Hospital. And I'm sure the presentations you're going to get today are going to be, doesn't look very well, does he? Some of the presentations you're going to get today are going to be very, very similar. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the career college concept worked. And as soon as we met Ruth, I was Ruth, and you just knew that this was going to be something that was going to be palatable. And I only do things in the best interest of learners. I go into a lot of colleges where people do strange, really strange things. But I always live by a mantra. If it's in the best interest of the learners, try it. And this, without doubt, was one of those things. Thank you.
Unlike the earlier speakers, John has allowed us a bit of time for questions. So, are there any questions coming out from other career colleges?
That was
That
easy.
was spellbinding, wasn't it? Well, in that case, we'll break early. And I want to thank John. First of all, it's good that you're still alive.
Thank you. It's gone down now.
I hope your heart rate's gone down, yeah. But also, I thought it was very good after the early strategic speeches to be brought down to earth, and especially as a West Country man to be brought down to earth in Yeovil, which is a good place to be. So many thanks, John.
Thank you.